Hello and welcome to another week of church chat. No,
Church chat.
pastor discussion. This week, I am myself, Pastor Andrew, in Rochester, New York. I have to look at my cheat sheet to know that. No, serving Resurrection. Once again, we have Jeff Steele-Stieber in Avon Lake, serving Christ Lutheran.
Ooh. He went to the ELCA website to look that up.
I did not. And we're blessed to welcome back Pastor Will Smith from Fort Wayne, also serving Resurrection, but not the same as me. So this week, as we before we started to record, we started to discuss, what should we talk about? That seems to be our discussion every week. Well, what should we talk about? So on that note, we always put it at the end, but now we're going to also put it at the beginning. If you that are watching this have any ideas, be it in Indiana, New York, or Avon Lake, or parts unknown, respond on Facebook or wherever you're watching this, and just let us know, and we can maybe try and tackle that subject or those subjects.
Andrew, are people able, when you put it on YouTube, because I know you post a lot of stuff to YouTube, can they post comments right on YouTube, or do you have it to the settings where they can't do comments?
Yeah, so I learned like a lot of things with our pandemic world. I've learned kind of a baptism by fire with YouTube. Anyway, long past your answer. Yes, they can put comments on there.
Okay.
In fact, yeah. Well, I won't say that, but we have had a few comments, but they were the ones that were flagged by YouTube from people trying to do bad links. Let's call them that. Inappropriate links.
Wow.
So luckily those weren't put up.
Good.
So now you know that. But this week, just kind of an intro. This last Tuesday, I was in a conference Zoom meeting. So a conference for us is a geographical area. So it was several pastors that are just meeting together, and the purpose of that meeting is to kind of check in with each other. Sometimes we do a bit of a scripture discussion, like for the upcoming Sunday or things like that. But one pastor asked a question that initially I was stumped, as were, it appeared, the other 24 pastors. But she asked the question, what are you doing in this time to nurture your soul? So she asked that question, and as I said, 24 pastors on Zoom all had blank looks on their face. And I think part of it was they weren't quite sure how to answer. And so I presented to Jeff and Will today maybe just a little brief discussion about that. And there's several pieces to this. Something that I often tell a lot of my parishioners is, pastors are people too. And I've had over 15 years different responses to that, from they are to, well, of course you are. But just a discussion with that, because, and I'll share this. I didn't say it in my conference meeting, but I was telling Jeff and Will this. I sit in my office and I stare at all of my books, and something that I'm doing these last 2 weeks, which I think is kind of weird, but obviously I thought it was good, or nurturing my soul. I don't know I go that far, but I haven't read Dante since high school, so I have that on my bookshelf. So I took it home, and now I'm starting to read that again, and it's fascinating. But I think a piece of this too, and Jeff had mentioned this before we started recording, is there's other things that we do to nurture our soul. And again, those watching this might go, yeah, of course that makes sense. But people were surprised that I watched and enjoyed Game of Thrones, because it was, well, why would a pastor watch that? And it's like, well, I like dragons, and
because I'm a nerd.
Yeah, or and again, this will show how much of a nerd I am. Even though I'm on my probably fourth or fifth cell phone since this game came out. I still play Pokemon Go. You know, I signed up a month before it was released because I'm like, yeah, that'll be fun. I think I was part of the group of people that are like, oh, well, you know, you got to walk around with that, so I'll get exercise. And of course, if you could see the rest of me, you might question that. But, you
I've
know,
caught 3 Pokemon so far.
I have caught over
Two of them were
50,000.
crippled. They'd been attacked and had this terrible limp. That's
thrown out by 2 other people that who had abused them and didn't want them anymore.
Wow.
Well, okay. You opened that door. I just ran through the rest of it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess I just wanted to throw it out, of course, to both Will and Jeff.
I'll be Jeff today. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. But really, to anyone that's watching this, or maybe even someone that's watching this, to ask others that aren't watching this but should, promo, you know, what are you doing in this time? Or really, outside of this pandemic world, what do we do to nurture our soul? And I'll just say this before I turn it over to these two guys, these two characters. You know, you might think, and you might have thought, even it went across my mind on Tuesday with other pastors. You would think pastors would say, oh, well, I'm really taking this time to, you know, dive into the book of Revelation and do some deep study. Well, I really don't want to do that. You know, I want to watch mindless shows. You know, this week I worked it out so that, you know, I'm able to watch Shark Week. That's just so calming for me to watch great white sharks eat meat, I guess. But, you know, it's like, what are we doing to care for our soul so that all these stressors aren't just controlling us? All right, I think I talked enough. How about you two?
I would say that what I've actually done is I've taken the opportunity to dive deeper into Revelation and some other books of the Bible. No, I just wanted to say that. Will, I actually want you to go first, but I wanted to say that so I didn't forget it.
I just want to say that the other Pokemon that he got probably came with the app.
It was a starter Pokemon.
You are both beloved children of God. And I think you know what that means.
Yeah. Oh, we came with the app. And if you click on it, its tagline is just "Help me, save me." So this actually ties in, and then I'll circle back. It ties in for me. It's interacting, connecting with people that I can enjoy myself with, taking care of my soul, to bring laughter and to be able to be myself in ways that I might feel like I need to kind of shield different parts of that when I'm with other people, whether it's for professional reasons or societal reasons, even. But there are, it's great, I think, when you can have people that you can go to where you can kind of let those walls down, put those shields down, and just be yourself. And that can be in fun ways where we're laughing, joking, teasing each other. It can be when if you're sad and you're sharing something really horrible that's happened or venting. But being able to have somebody else or multiple people is a great thing. So I think that is one way for people to care for their souls. And I think part of it, at least for me, is when going through seminary, with these two for the first couple of years, and Will and I did our clinical pastoral education together, at a hospital, served as chaplains, and Andrew did his at the same time, but at a hospital across town. you go through things and you learn stuff about each other that you wouldn't necessarily tell other people. So all of the pretense is gone. It's just like, this is who I am, and you either like me or you don't. And that's, I think you need to be able to find people like that. So what your question originally, what I thought of, Andrew, when you first asked it, was, it made me remember in seminary, and I've preached on this or told people about this in congregations, is for a lot of the classes that the professor would start off the class and say, all right, who would like to open our class with prayer today? Mm. And if you want to find a way to shut up pastors or seminary students super fast, you just say, all right, who wants to pray? Because almost everyone's heads would go down, like, don't make eye contact with the teacher, don't raise your hand. And it didn't happen every time. There were a few suck ups, but a lot of times that would be the response. And I think that touches something with what you're saying too, Andrew, is that I know for me personally, when the professor would ask that, I wouldn't want to pray, because I was, at first, now I would do it, but at first I was afraid that I wouldn't be able to pray the right way, or I wouldn't give the prayer that everyone else was expecting, and so it was like going kind of that self-judgment in my own head. Whereas when somebody else raised their hand to pray, I wasn't judging them. I was like, thank God they raised their hand, and so what does that really say about us? When someone says, how do you find your joys? Do we have to say we're reading the Bible, or I decided to relearn biblical Greek so I can do better exegetical work? No, I like to watch Game of Thrones. I've never seen the show personally, but there's other shows that I watched that are really bad. That I'm not saying Game of Thrones. Let me rephrase that. There's other shows I watch.
I'm done talking to you.
There are
other
other shows.
Watched Game of Thrones?
I've never watched Game of Thrones.
Are you, a communist?
Whoa!
Wow. Yeah. So I've never watched it, but there, I agree with you. There's sometimes when I just want to disconnect from everything and watch something that doesn't necessarily have any quote unquote value to it, as far as like, it doesn't make me a better person. Whether it's that, I think you have to almost have to like sprinkle in different types of activities, because I think you need that to unplug. I think you need to nurture. I think you need like different avenues to be able to go if you're really gonna, tend to the soul. And I'm gonna turn this over because Will's in Indiana, and if there's one thing I know about Indiana, it's that everyone who lives there is a farmer. So he'll be able to go with this, and that's coming from somebody from Ohio. That for agriculture, saying there's different avenues. If all you did was add water to plants, or you didn't care about the soil, you didn't care about, the other things you have to do, then your plant is not going to grow as well. So
wow, that's biblical.
Didn't you like how I did that? Yeah. That was deep. Follow that garbage.
Deep insight and an insult at the same time.
That's 2 points for me. So we need a scoreboard on this. So how would you agree, Will, that it takes different ways to nurture? It's not just like doing one thing, but you have to do different types of things.
I would agree that you suck because you've not seen Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. Yeah. And I think that if I had been sitting in that meeting with you, Andrew, I would have been thinking to myself, one of the problems that we have is that one, they couldn't be honest.
Yeah.
Because everybody, even the pastor sitting in the room couldn't be real people with each other and actually talk about, what they were actually doing and what they were actually struggling with. They knew what the answer was supposed to be, but the other part of that is that I think that that's one of those things that we struggle with. And I also think that it's something that we don't give ourselves enough credit for. I know I myself, I really struggle with what I know I should be doing. I know I should be doing more. I know I should be doing an exegetical study on the book of Revelation, and reading Lenski's commentaries on St. Luke, and cracking out the old BDAG and, looking at the, the parsing of, that one word that Jesus spoke on the Mount that changes the whole angle of things. And,
Yeah.
I know I should be praying, 5 hours a day and, all that stuff. And, but, I think that there is, I think that we don't give ourselves enough credit, and that we also don't give God enough credit, because, when you ask that question of, what are you doing to nurture your souls? That's just turning it into another self-help thing, and,
Nice.
a Dr.
Phil moment, if you will.
Yeah. And, and there's something to that. I mean, honestly, we need to be held accountable. I mean, I'm not going to do it all the time, but I should be studying Revelation, I'm not going to do it all the time, but, I did read, a book, about what Paul really said, but notice
the width of that book.
You read a
pamphlet. You read a pamphlet.
But at the same time, I've got, some other books that I've read that were just for fun. Like I just reread Dune. And I don't know why I like the story Dune, because it's ridiculous.
I've never read that either or seen the movie. Just putting that out there.
And I'll just say, I just read the whole series again.
Yeah. Hey. See,
so I won't be invited back next week.
Yeah, Jeff, you can leave now. But but there are some stories that I just I go back to every once in a while. Like I do like Tolkien's, the Ring series.
I've never heard of that. What is that?
And it can be kind of tedious and it takes a long time, but I enjoy just going for the ride because he's very descriptive in what he writes, and so it's really easy for me to picture it. And I don't necessarily have to have something happening in the story to just be taking a ride somewhere, and it's nice, and
I wish you wouldn't read while you drove.
Yeah.
But other than that, I think, well, I want to piggyback off that, Will, to say that something I heard another pastor say, I don't know, like 6 years ago, is really stuck with me, is that if we as pastors or we as Christians only focus on Christian things, quote unquote church things, then how do we relate to people who are not already with us? So if other people are reading those books, if other people, and I know at least 2 other people based on ratings watch Game of Thrones, if other people are watching those kind of shows or reading these kind of books or listening to that kind of music, whatever, then if we are not also going into that and participating in that as well, then how are we going to have a common foundation to be able to talk to people and to get a third pastoral point? Part of what made Paul, I would assume, I didn't read that pamphlet that Will held up, but part of what made Paul so appealing and so effective was that he was able to talk to people where they were at. He was very contextual. So I think that, to what Andrew's original question was, and then also to Will's response, that I don't think we should judge ourselves on that. That is part of being just a part of the world, and, doing that so that, there can also actually be a benefit from it. We might not see it at that time, but there can still be a benefit that we can connect with people and talk to people. I'll stop. So Andrew played me off with some music in my headphones. So
I want to piggyback on that.
Nice. 3-tier piggy. It's getting dirty.
It's a lot of pork.
A lot. That's a ham sandwich.
But it's interesting that you bring that up. How do we relate to others? Because the presiding bishop, when all of this started, in like her first letter or video or whatever, she said, to all the pastors out there, if you're streaming, you need to realize that the church in itself, the congregation, is now a lot bigger, potentially. So it's like when you preach, you need to think about who's hearing it, because there may be people not that never have been to your church or a church, and they fall upon your thing. And what if they click, watch this? How are you preaching to them? And there were so many comments on that and I'm hoping, you see, I've been, in a sense, I want to say I'm praying that they were being either sarcastic or flippant or whatever, because a lot of them were like, well, how do you do that? But the thing
Yeah, that
is
sucks.
talking to some of my peers, and listening to how they're preparing sermons, I don't know, in a sense, I don't know who they're talking to. Like I don't know who their audience is. And, and that's something I think as pastors we need to think about. But then really, I think as Christians, as children of God, or simply as people of faith, or those searching for faith, how, I think that's just a larger question. How do we relate to other people if, we don't have that experience, or we don't listen to those experiences? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
And that's how I really try to approach, that's really how I try to approach my ministry, is, to have those experiences. Because, I mean, I've gone through, I think I've gone through my fair share of things. And a lot of that stuff is, of course, difficult to go through at the time, but at some point you're like, this is helpful in this ministry, or this is helpful to connect with someone. I kind of guess I brought it a little bit down there, but
No.
I think it's interesting, that seemed, when Elizabeth Eaton said that, it seemed to surprise some people.
Yeah.
And they didn't even think about it. And it's like, yeah, that's what you think about. And every week as I put my sermons together, I'm like, how would the guy I know down the street who professes his hatred for religion or organized religion or faith, if he were to click on this and be like, all right, I'm going to see what Andrew said, how is he going to hear that?
Yeah.
And I've had a few people comment on that from the congregation.
Well, so then I think I'm going to turn this question to Will, just because he brings, once again, as we said last week, if you didn't watch last week, watch it when you have the chance, because Will brings our intelligence and faith level up a whole 7 notches. So
I'd say 7 times 70.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh.
Wow. Ooh, I'm going to turn the other cheek at that comment. So Will, who do you think we are supposed to be trying to reach? Like, because what Andrew has just said, and with, talking about what Bishop Eaton said, I think that's really interesting, because most times, like outside of COVID, when everything was just, just moving along, chugging along, the people I was trying to reach were people in the church. I mean, I always want to reach people outside the church, but the reality was the people I was talking to were people in the church. And so that was kind of how I had to frame my message. But taking with what Andrew is saying, that expanding the field of who we're talking to, I guess I have 2 questions that you're going to answer. One,
are you going to get to them soon?
If you ever get done talking, maybe.
The first question is, do you think that would that change how you'd preach? And then 2, is there a way to talk to both at the same time? The people that are in the church and then people who are out, or are they 2 separate styles of messages?
Well, no, I don't think they are. I mean, if we're honest about it, I think it goes back to what I have to assume was going on in that conference gathering that Andrew brought up, that and probably even more so in the congregation, is that people are people, and we do we're constantly doing it as human beings. I mean, we try to fit in, And so, you know, it's like you look around and like, well, nobody else has any problems in this room. I need to act like I don't have any problems, you know.
Nice.
You know, I need to act like, I wasn't screaming at my kids pulling into the parking lot. My wife hasn't talked to me in 3 days, and
Right.
so I don't know that I don't think that there is any difference. Now, topically, maybe, like if there's something going on that, like in the church that, people are struggling with, you may have a little bit more direct connection there. But,
right.
But I think that, I think a big part of the challenge, though, is the same thing. And, going back to the original question of, how do we nurture our souls? I think it begins by being honest about who we are, and I think that it also begins with accepting who we are. I'm not Jim Pike. That man can consume, deep theological textbooks, and loves it. Like he sits down after dinner to do that. And
while other people are talking around him, and he's still like, oh, Pope, the eighth Pope, I'll read his biography while I'm talking to you. What?
But then, there's that part that we have to trust that the Holy Spirit is moving. God spoke through Balaam's donkey. There's a biblical reference.
Nice. Numbers 25.
Wow.
Don't look that up. But I'm pretty sure that's right.
I'm looking it up.
Something good finally came out of Cleveland.
Wow.
Yeah, look that up. Cross-reference that. Keep going, Will. I'm sorry. I'm pretty sure that's true, though.
But if God can do that, then maybe, just maybe, God can use us to say things that we weren't intending to, as well. But I find that a lot of times, when looking at that stuff, some of it is about figuring out where the priorities really lie, and taking care of yourself. And making time for mindless stuff is great. And I think that everybody needs to do that. But, like another one that for me is really hard is making sure I'm prioritizing my relationships.
Yeah.
And God is one of those. If you're investing less time in God than you are in, maintaining, a good friendship, then, you're not holding up your end of the deal,
Number's 22.
It's 22. I was so close. I've been reading Revelation so much. I need to go back to the numbers.
But for me, like a big one is maintaining a relationship with my kids.
Yeah.
And really, honestly, I don't know why I have to be mindful about that anyway. They're really my favorite people. Besides my wife, I mean, she's obviously my favorite person.
Yeah.
Sue,
and she's watching this. Yeah.
Nice.
But
you worked that in there. Good.
And Will, that how, and I think with God and maybe this is what was getting at the heart of the question that the person asked at Andrew's conference meeting is, like, when you have those relationships, it's so much easier to tend to them when they're going well. When they're going well, it's like, I want to hang out with you. I want to talk. I want to, share my time and my feelings. It just takes a few bumps in the road to be like, maybe I don't want to invest in that anymore. So saying, how are you tending to your soul in a way, to me, almost from my cynical side, implies that maybe I'm not, like, that I even have to think about it. But what would either of you have to say about that, whether it's with God, with our spouses, with our children, our friends? How do you deal with those when it's hard, like when things are not going super well, or there's a difficult issue? I mean, is there a good way to approach those, or to try to bring it back, or no? Or is that something you experience, I guess?
You have to grown up it,
Yeah.
You have to adult it. That's what it is. You have to adult it.
You have to adult it. Yep.
I agree.
That means you show up, which you know, I find is 90% of doing what we're supposed to be doing anyway is just showing up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So do you view your time with or your relationship with God in the same way you view your relationship with your spouse or your kids? Or, I mean, do you approach it the same way? I don't know if I do. And I'm not saying that's right. I don't know if I do.
I think that it's for me, it's what I work at is for it to just be an integrated part of my day, you know? And so I can't say that I do a really good job of sitting down in the morning and praying. I do sometimes, you know?
Right.
But I'm, you know, if I look at it, I can say that there are multiple times throughout the day where I'm in conversation.
Yeah.
You know, and that, but again, see, that takes intentionality. I mean, it really, you know, and I find that, you know, just in the same way where, you know, things kind of get rocky with my wife or with my kids, then I have to start thinking about, okay, how much time have I been spending connecting?
Yeah.
And, you know, if I feel distant, it's probably because I've put something in between us. You know?
Yeah. Yeah. What about you, Andrew?
But I think that we fall down on it when we try and make it 7 o'clock in the morning, you know, right before I head out to, you know, spend a half an hour in prayer. You know, it's like, well, you know, if you set the bar that high, you're never going to clear it.
Yeah.
And, you know, and that's not being real. So let's be real about who we are and how does it actually fit?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's
And, you know,
process.
what's worked for me, well, a few things. So, of course, in these last however many months, being the only one that's in the church, because I will come over here because we live right next door to the church. I have, and since I have no one to talk to, I've been talking a lot more with God. But as I say in like sermons, studies, all this kind of stuff, a lot of times my prayers are like one word. Like if I'm writing a sermon or if I'm sitting here or I'm kind of thinking about something, you know, it's just like a, you know, or well, yeah. And another thing for me is maybe this is something you were saying, Will, if I understood it correctly, is if it doesn't work for me to say, okay, you know, every morning from 8 to 8:30, I'm going to engage in some kind of spiritual exercise, or that's when that'll be my devotional time, because it just doesn't, it works for me, I think, like other things, where it just doesn't, you know, it works for like a week and then it's just like, oh, well, look, it's 8:15 and it didn't start, and all this other stuff comes. So I kind of maybe am a little more lax on that, but I'm aware of it. You know, like I almost want to say I do like a check-in, you know, of, well, you know, how was my relationship this week? And maybe that even goes back to that original question of what am I doing for my soul? Maybe that little check-in is, you know, taking care of my soul or checking in on where I'm at with that. Because, yeah. Yep.
Yeah. And I think for me, I get the intentionality, and I also agree with what both of you were saying about setting the time. You know, it takes so long to establish those habits, but the first time or the second time you break it, it's like, well, I'm just done with it now. You know,
Yeah.
You know, so that discipline is really hard to maintain. But I find, you know, I get the intentionality, but I do find myself other times where I find myself praying. Like I didn't it's like I realize it as it's going on that I'm like, I didn't sit there and go like, I need to talk to God right now, or I need to it's just all of a sudden in my mind, I'll be like, oh, wow, I'm actually having this, you know, conversation with God right now. I mean, it doesn't phrase like that in my head, but Um, but yeah, I guess I'm wondering, Andrew, as well, for that initial question, and not to bring this discussion down any further
Relate.
than we've done. But something that I experienced when I first after I was first ordained and talking to members of the congregation about about keeping focused and about vision and vision for ministry is, if I were to say to people, give me 3 things you love about the congregation and give me 3 things you dislike about what's going on in the congregation, people can think of the 3 things they dislike, at least in my experience, a lot faster
Oh yeah.
than they can think of the 3 things they like, you know? And so when saying how are you bringing joy to your soul, or how are you tending to your soul, I think there's, as much as I almost don't like the question, I think there is a real validity to it, because it's easy to allow that to slip. And you don't, for me at least, sometimes I don't realize I've slipped until I've slipped really far, and then go, oh crap, how did I find myself here? And now it's going to take a lot more to get me out. So I don't know if any of that makes sense, or if you guys have experience with that, but that's what was coming to me.
No, I connect with that, and again, maybe a piggyback off of that.
Yeah,
One
we're
thing
5
that
pigs high.
it's a lot of slop.
It's a lot of slop.
You know, something that I found is, if as a pastor, if someone comes to me to talk, or like for any kind of like maybe pastoral counseling, I find it easier, and maybe that's the wrong word, but that's what I'm going to use. I find it easier to identify, like, if they're in that place than if I were to be in that place, you know, until it's like, wow, I've really sunk deep and this is where I'm at. And so it gets to that point of, if I were the one coming in and talking to me, am I able to identify where I'm at, and what would I say to myself? You know what I mean? You know what I'm trying to say here? Because I mean, that's happened quite a few times, and I've had to have someone else say to me, hey, like, actually ask that question. It's like, well, what would you say to yourself? And I'm like, well, I don't know. But then I think about it, and I'm like, well, this is what I would say. Well, then why didn't you think of that? And it's like, oh, I don't know, because I think you just get lost in that. And I often wonder if, and I don't even actually, now that I think about it, I don't think that's like a counselor, therapist, pastor, in a sense, issue. I just think that's a individual, a person issue, you know.
Yeah.
Sometimes see, biblical. Sometimes it's hard to see the, you know, log in our eye. I'm probably not using that right.
And
but
there's a mite. You can see the speck and the other. Yeah. I've seen Godspell. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, you showed it to me.
Yeah.
Andrew, you have to watch this. You have to watch this.
Yeah, it's a movie. So yeah, you just threw me off. That's good. There was something I was going to say with that, but we'll bring it up.
Well, I think we watched it on your 13-inch TV, so that was awesome.
We did. That is a story.
You're thinking about 2x4s.
Yeah.
Eyeballs.
Yeah. The log. He's saying 2x4s.
Log.
Yeah. Log in your eye. The 2x4 in your eye.
Yeah.
The speck. Yeah.
The speck.
Yeah.
The speck in the eye.
Yeah. Well, how?
Are we
Okay.
helping you think of what you wanted to say?
Yeah, I did. I just thought of it, so that worked.
Did you?
So
Okay,
your stupidity brought me back to reality. How? I think I just lost it again. But it was worth. But it was worth the joke. Oh, okay. So
Wow.
how often do members of your congregation ask you how you're doing spiritually?
You know, honestly, for me, that was a rarity. But I've been asked in this congregation a number of times, you know, how are you? And it's more of a, how are you doing? And but I can't think of a specific, how are you doing spiritually, but it's kind of, I think it's implied in there. It's just like,
Yeah.
how are you doing?
And I would take that too. I mean, I know I said, how are you doing spiritually, but just honestly, like you said, just checking in, how are you doing, and, overall. So you, in your congregation you're currently at, you get that, you've received that more. About you, Will.
Yeah. Yeah. That, there are a handful of folks who ask me that question periodically. There's actually one gentleman who had never had this happen before. He's like, he called me up and he was like, Pastor, I want to meet with you. I'm like, okay. He was like, can you meet for lunch? And I was like, yeah, sure. And so we met and sat down, and I was expecting, you did this, or, my wife's upset about that, or, whatever. And he said, I wanted to take some time to ask you how you are. And that threw me so far off that I, for once in my life, I didn't have anything to say.
Yeah. How did it make you feel? Like when you guys, cause I don't really get asked that, maybe once or twice in 14 years. How do you feel when somebody asks you that?
Feels good. Yeah. It's important. I guess actually it makes me feel a little uncomfortable, but
that's what I was wondering. Yeah.
Being treated with care is, it makes me uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So I have to remind myself to appreciate it, but then I remind myself to appreciate it. And yeah.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
What about you?
No, that brought to mind a story for me, which, even now as I think about it, honestly, I mean, in all seriousness, honestly, it almost makes me tear up because it was such a powerful story, or it's such a powerful moment. There was a gentleman who, when I was in the call process for one of the congregations, it was an elaborate process, and then before the vote, like the night before the vote, he came up to me at like the potluck and everything, and he says, okay, just forget all that other stuff. When are you going to be my pastor? And that kind of just budded into really just kind of this special relationship, almost like a grandfather, grandson kind of relationship, but just support. Anyway, all that to say, it really, like with his family, I mean, it felt like family, and when he passed away, I was there, and I was with his wife and his kids and stuff. And I was talking with his wife, and she turned to me, and I'm trying to be pastoral and caring for them. And she turned to me and she says, well, how are you doing with this? And I was just like, what?
You're like, what do you need? Yeah. How can I help you?
No, because she says, I know this is tough for you too. And she goes, and of course I'm glad you're here, but she said, how are you doing? I know this is tough for you as much as it is for us. And again, I was just like, what? But I don't know where I was going with that. It just, what Will said brought that to mind for me. It was just a moment. It was what I want to call, I don't know how to describe it, just a family moment. I haven't felt that way before. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It sounds like in both those situations that you guys have brought up, that someone saw each of you for you, as opposed to just like what you were doing for them, or what you could provide for them, in a pastoral sense or whatever. But they saw you just as a person and wanted to know how you, without the title attached, were doing.
Yeah.
Which is an amazing gift to be able to receive. However, I would admit, and I would have to work on what Will said, that I think I would feel uncomfortable at first. Like
Yeah.
and I think it ties back to what you said earlier, Andrew, that it's much easier for me to ask somebody else that than to have somebody ask me that. Because, that there's vulnerability, but I probably should also remind me, because I do it so often, I don't remember or realize always that there is vulnerability when I'm asking that question for the other person, and to hold that really truly as a special, vulnerable, sacred, holy, whatever word you want to use, moment, that if somebody opens up, that's something special is happening right there. So did you guys thank the people that asked you?
Well, honestly, I think that would have been kind of weird.
I mean, afterward. I'm not saying like right there, like, well, thank you for asking me, and like you launch into a formal response. I'm saying, have you ever since that moment said to them, you did this and that, I just want to say thank you for that. Like, you might not even remember saying this to me, but I want to say thank you. Have you, either of you? Will already said that yes, he did, and we should expect that from Will because he's better than both of us. But for you, Andrew, the lesser, is that, have you maintained that relationship, and or is it something that you just feel like she knows that you're thankful?
No, actually, so actually, I just chuckle because I did kind of bring it up because initially when she said that, and actually, I mean, like the family, it was almost like she said that and the family was involved too, the kids. It's just because we had this relationship, and I don't even know what to call it. It's just family relationship. It felt like family. And, but I talked to her a few months after that, and I wasn't uncomfortable when she said that. It caught me off guard. And she has like a freezer full of cookies, so she always wants me to come over for cookies that she thawed, which I think is hilarious. But anyway,
Yeah.
I did bring it up, and it wasn't necessarily uncomfortable bringing it up. It was just like, that I know this was your husband of, I mean, all these years. I said, but when you asked me, I said that really meant a lot to me, and it was more of a thank you for letting me be a part of everything with you. And she looked at me and she's like, yeah, of course. Why wouldn't we? It was just like, you don't need to say that, and, yeah, and I want to say things like, that to me is that, again, maybe this is very pastorally of me to use this, but when I think of like one of the glories of God's kingdom, I mean, that was a kingdom experience for me. That relationship, that moment, the moment months later, the continuing relationship.
Yeah.
How she offers me a cocktail every once in a while when I stop by, even if it's 9:30 in the morning.
I think you need to rephrase that and say, when I drink a cocktail with her, even if it's 9:30 in the morning.
Yeah.
Acts chapter 1 or 2, these men are not drunk. It is only 9 in the morning. Thank you. Yeah. Pastor points. So I will end my portion of the response to this initial question by telling this story, as I've been told I have done in the past. And this isn't just me sharing another Will story, since I've shared a lot of Andrew ones. And this brings me joy. So all this today brings me joy. Hearing the ways that you guys are doing ministry brings me joy. The way that people in your congregations have ministered to you also brings me joy. So the story is, when my wife Melissa was pregnant with our first child, and Sue, Will's wife, was pregnant with their third child, we took a trip one day in the Smiths minivan, or down to a town south of Columbus where they had an outlet mall to get baby stuff. And you guys may remember this or you may not, but it's just south where you get on the highway, one parts of the highway, right by the seminary, was this little loop, and it wasn't necessarily in the best neighborhood, if you will, but we had just gotten onto the highway to make like this 45 or hour drive down to this place, and it's Will, his wife Sue, his two kids, Noah and Hannah at the time, myself and my.
I think that's still their names.
Yeah, at the time. And we just gotten on, and all of a sudden we see up ahead, or Will saw up ahead, there was a guy on the side of the road with his car broken down. 99 out of, let's make that 999 out of 1,000 times, if it was me driving, I would have drove right past the guy. Will goes, oh, hey, there's a guy up there on the side of the road, needs help. And I think Sue was like, oh, well, pull over. And he was like, yep, okay. Pulled over. We didn't know this guy. He's got his two small kids in the car. He's got their two, not this hopefully doesn't sound sexist. We have two pregnant women in the car. And he pulls over for this guy on the side of the road who's having car troubles, gets out. We ask the guy, we say, what's going on? He says something about the car. And Will goes, oh, well, if you need, I can get you a ride to take you to a gas station or take you somewhere to be able to, try to get some help. And the guy was like, yeah, that'd be great. The guy hops in the van, Dumb and Dumber style. We start singing Mockingbird. It was great. But he gets in the minivan. We take him to wherever he needed to go. And then we made our, finish with the rest of our trip. And what was so amazing to me about that, or two things. One, it took no discussion really for Will, or I would even credit Sue as well. It was just like, oh, well, there's somebody who needs help. We can potentially help them. Let's help them. And so they did it. And the other thing that was amazing was it wasn't even something like that. I don't want to say it was like the good deed to like be bragged about or whatever. It was just like, we just went on with the rest of our day after that. Yeah. So, to me, that moment, that memory with Will and Sue and with his two oldest at the time, has stuck with me, of just a really good example of somebody being that Christian when you don't have to be, because everybody else drove by that guy and Will chose not to. So I was worried, and I did argue with him afterwards of putting my life in danger and the life of my beloved wife, but he was right. We ended up being safe. And having those little memories brings me joy that there is good in the world, and that what we're doing is worthwhile. So thank you, sir. I don't know if you remember that experience. You probably have done it so many times, helped so many people, that it might not be in your brain anymore, but that happened.
I remember going down to the outlet mall. I don't.
Right. Yeah. You don't remember helping a guy out on the way down there.
No.
That's great.
Now, there's a lot that I don't remember, though. My kids make fun of me because I can remember obscure things that I've read, or, things like I keep straight people's stories out at church. But, my own stuff, I have no recollection. Yeah. I damaged my brain too much in high school, I think.
Well, so. Yeah. That is right.
No.
And with that, pastors are people.
Yay! Joy. Yeah.
No, good. So I think this was a good discussion. Something that I forgot to say at the beginning, because I'm wrapping it up now as I have more places to be. Again, a haircut, which these other two it's a foreign concept. But this in itself, doing these weekly gatherings has been something that's nurtured my soul, even though we rag on each other, but we do laugh. And I think in the midst of that, we share, at least the other two, share some very deep insights. And I really give thanks for that, because it nurtures my soul to do that, even when it was just Jeff. So with that,
I think it's amazing that you're going to do the good deed of going and donating to Locks of Love.
Yeah, that would, yeah.
There's some child somewhere that's going to be very thankful for your gift today.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing some kid with your beard hair all over the top of their head. I think.
I don't think you are.
Don't. Yeah. No, I am. I want to see that video.
Yeah, just for your information, I have done that before, and I look great with long hair.
I know you were a vampire when you were younger, weren't you? That's a whole nother. You had a whole interview with a vampire, goth look going for you. I remember those pictures.
Yeah, they called me LaFat. So,
I will drink your carbs.
Good. So, on that note,
hit the button.
No, on that note,
hit the button.
We will conclude this week. And again, if you have comments or ideas, please share those where you can. And until next time, be blessed.
I have to go catch more Pokemon.